Oops, I lost my video here. There we go. Hey, what's up, everybody? I know we're kind of all trickling in here, but as you guys are arriving to the episode today, would love to hear where you're from in the chat. Always one of my favorite parts of the episode. So go ahead, let us know where you're from, and we'll dive into it in a second. I'm sure we got a lot of coaches kind of coming from sessions this morning and such. So, Rob, welcome, dude. Yeah, as you folks are trickling in, let us know where you're from. New Orleans, hell yeah, Oregon, Philly. Nice. I'm in Vegas for a conference, so doing it from the hotel room today, not my usual setup, but love it. Very national crew.
Yeah, got a good spread of people
International
there.
now. Got some Canadians. Yeah. Welcome, folks. Sick. Well, we're gonna get it going. Just to let you guys know a little bit about us, right? Unwrapped is a live conversation series from Bridge Athletic. Bridge provides coaching tools to world-renowned organizations like Atlanta Falcons, Naval Special Warfare, University of Arizona, and Westside Barbell. They provide very same tools for coaches like me and you to use in our communities, to deepen the training experience there. So, Unracked is like our free conversation series that Bridge puts on. We break down systems, methods, philosophies that drive performance at the highest level. And really, each episode is designed to take you inside a specific approach, kind of like how things are built, how things are applied, and how, everything is really evolving under real world conditions with coaches that are like actually doing something meaningful in the arena there. So the only kind of disclosure here I got to read is views expressed by our guests are their own and don't necessarily reflect the position of Bridge Athletic or our partners. Today's guest, all right, Chief Relations Officer and Director of Education for the USPA, where he also served as Team USA head coach from 2021 through 2026. Uh, He's the founder of Dream Team Performance and has spent decades working at the intersection of elite coaching, education and development, and business leadership. Kyle consults with elite athletes, coaches, and gym owners nationwide on training, strategy, and program development. And with powerlifting being one of the fastest growing sports in the world, I think Kyle's one of the best equipped people to kind of let us know how we got here, what we're doing now to build the future of the sport. And yeah, Kyle Young, welcome to the show, man.
Appreciate it.
Course, brother. So I kind of want to start today, getting a little bit more understanding about, your background and, obviously you've coached at the world level. That's not something everyone is going to get to do. And I'm really curious, like how you built, your skills to step up and take that role.
Yeah, so starting way back early on in my career, I was just a little guy in gym, and I got my first personal training cert because I wanted to better understand what I was doing. We're talking like 20 years ago, right? So um, a lot of there's a lot of information out there. There's even more now with Instagram and social media and all this stuff. But a ton of information, a lot of it didn't quite seem right to me. I'm looking at some big dudes in the gym. And I'm like, this doesn't really look right. I'm getting all these different bits of information. So let me dive in. Let me get my certification. Let me start learning. Then that led to, hey, maybe I can quit doing construction and other stuff and make some money at this. So, like a lot of trainers, I walk up to one of the big guys in the gym, probably bench press like at 500 pounds, right? Horrendous form. And I'm like, hey, I think I can help you. Followed up with the how much do you bench question. I'm like, 225. When you can bench 500, you come tell me something. And I think there's still a lot of that out there with strength athletes. But
For
I
sure.
realized there was a lot to learn and mostly my approach to big, strong athletes. But fast forward, went from there to working in a gym as a personal trainer to becoming a lead trainer, fitness manager, rode the ranks pretty good through there, was co-owner of a CrossFit gym. During that time, I was still just very interested in studying and learning everything. And I was trying to get as many certifications as I could. Um, USAW coach, CrossFit coach. I fell in love with strength as an athlete. I was trained to get my black belt, training kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, all kinds of things. But for me, ultimately, everything I did fitness related, CrossFit, no matter what it was, it led back to strength. Did my first powerlifting meet, had no idea what I was doing. I was the annoying kid who walked in, wrapping my own knees, didn't know where to be, what to do, asked everybody in line, like, hey, do you know when I should warm up? A lot of people were like, "Get out of
Yeah.
here, kid." But also, a lot of people, the sport of powerlifting is pretty cool. I see it all the time at meets now. Pretty helpful. You obviously
Yeah.
don't know what you're doing. Go over here, do this. And ultimately, I fell in love with strength, and I've worked with so many athletes, pro fighters, pro ball players, strongman, obviously most power lifters, but enough athletes to know that the stronger we can get people, the better base we have. Then I can send the CrossFit out for their gymnastics training, right? For their
Mhm.
Olympic weightlifting. But a strong base, I don't care what you play, table tennis, a strong base is going to keep you injury free and excel at performance. So fast forward, a lot of coaches probably know me from my years at Kabuki Strength. I was on the side of Kabuki Strength before it was even a company, before they had a Duffalo bar and a shoulder rock in
Yeah.
Portland, Oregon. I remember sending some of my athletes there. I had my own gym, and I started cross training there when it was still Elite Performance Center for my competition prep.
Yeah.
Fast forward, I remember going to, I think it was their second certification, and that was a big game changer for me because I realized, and where I'm going with this is systems. I realized that even though I was a national champion, had coached a couple world record holders at this point in time, I had so much information up here and I couldn't display it well, right? I didn't have a good way to take in information either. It was a lot of in-person training and it was great, but there wasn't a duplicatable system. I took the first, and it wasn't even Kabuki strength still at the time, it was Duffin movement systems. Um,
Yeah.
the
That's a
information was
throwback.
about the
That's
same.
crazy.
I
Yeah.
think it was seminar number two, and I was blown away, pretty open to knowledge, but thinking I knew everything. And I learned some new stuff, but the simplicity of having a system, step one, step two, step three, to be able to duplicate it and share that knowledge. I came back to my gym first time in many, many years and made some massive changes to what I was doing and coaching.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, got out of the fitness industry, closed that down, that chapter in my life, started to work for Kabuki part time as a coach, sales. Um, that led to some interesting uh, times meeting a lot of the strength coaches. I was blessed to be a strength coach, but also on the sales side. Got to meet every single Major League Baseball coach throughout a couple years of spring training. Got to see some really cool
Yeah.
facilities and talk shop with a lot of the top coaches. Outside of just coaching strong athletes and powerlifters. So stayed with them up until the company changed and eventually they shut down. Fast forward a bit more, went more in depth with the USPA, helping them with their coaching and education program, among other things. International referee, Team USA head coach. At the
Yeah.
same time, I moved to Houston and started Dream Team Performance. So that's kind of how we got here where we're at.
I love it, dude. That's so cool. And I mean, I think a real testament to just like how long it takes to be in the room with those people, right? Like the relationship building and, a lot of it done through, education and like, mastering the craft, like with the gear and, all that stuff that you guys were doing out of Kabuki. That's badass, dude. I appreciate you sharing all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I kind of want to dive into like kind of a little bit of like what you just talked about, but like really like the history of powerlifting itself. And, from your perspective, like I feel like the sport's had parabolic growth, over the last decade, probably. But I'm really curious, like, from origin to like now, like what has shifted to make this like so in the mainstream?
Social media, I would say for one, right? If
Yeah.
you look at training in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, like I remember getting a download from Elite FTS, from Dave Tate, like, and I used half the paper in the gym to print it. There was no
Yep.
video to go watch, right? Back in the
Yeah.
day with competition, you didn't know what people were doing. People weren't posting on Facebook. Go back even further to date myself with strength training a bit, but like flip phones, you weren't recording videos and uploading them on Facebook, and before Facebook was a thing. So now the younger generation just has so much more in front of them, good and bad, right? That I
Hmm.
can
Hmm.
easily share and train with friends and whatever across the world by uploading. So I really think that was the biggest growth.
Hmm.
The female population is probably number two, where it was mostly definitely a male dominant sport, and it was just something meathead guys did. Women have fallen in love with strength training, and they know they're not going to get bulky, and they want to be proud and strong, and it's super awesome to see that growth going even faster, I think, than the rest of the population.
I love it. Yeah, like I mean, you mentioned kind of the good and the bad with the social media element there. Can you go a little deeper on that?
Yeah, for sure. So, I don't have a big social media following. I
Yep,
should put
same.
more out there, but I rode on the coattails of Kabuki Strength for so long. I personally just don't like social media. It annoys me.
Hmm.
That's why I try not to be on there that much. But one
Yep.
of the annoying things is you can go on and not to knock, coaches. I was actually talking with a client yesterday about a friend who started training with a new coach. And if you look at their social media, it looks huge, but how do they, if they're promoting their social media brand that much, how do they have time to really run spreadsheets, data, track things? They're a social
Yeah.
media influencer. Unless they work with three clients, they really can't put that much time into coaching. And a lot of youngsters don't see that. They're like, "Oh man, this person has 250,000 followers and they're big and strong." I always say it like my fighting background. Some of the best fighters I know couldn't teach you to throw a punch well at all.
Yeah,
And
totally.
it's not because they've been hit in the head a lot, right? That's not why.
Yeah.
They're just a stud athlete and they have no idea how they got there. And if they're
Yeah,
truly a stud athlete, teaching a more mortal human to have some skill, you're on two different starting places.
for sure.
Probably my biggest complaint. My second would be so much conflicting information. I see
Yeah.
youngsters start a program, and before they see it through, they're on to a different program or a different coach or a different follower. They
Mm.
haven't even
Hmm.
built their athletic base yet of, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it may be. Every 6 months, they're onto something else. And it's really hard to figure out what you're doing if you're always trying somebody else's theory and methodology. It's great to learn, but there's
Yeah.
so much bad information that's free and that people are paying for out there. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you on that point. And I think like the philosophies that obviously like stand on their own 2 feet under some serious scrutiny are obviously the ones that are working. But like, I feel like what I see on the social media side of things is like everybody kind of has this lift that they suck at or, whatever. And, like you said, they'll try 10 different things and see what works and maybe none of them work, for
yeah.
that athlete and such. But like then you look at guys like, like a John Hack or like a Colton Engelbrecht, and it's like you guys are like crushing all of us, right? At all three. And like I'm like kind of curious, like to dive into a little bit of the X's and O's and like the systems that are working, like for us mere mortals, I guess, so to speak. Like how do you feel like you can address that element of like, hey, like somebody sucks at this lift and we need to bring it up, and these are not like the world class athletes here. These are, normal folk like me and you.
Yeah. So, one thing that comes to mind, um, I'll go somewhere with this, but to jump back to the previous question or statement we were on, we used to see this at Kabuki Strength a lot, and then with
Yeah.
USPA at in-person seminars. And let's say
Hmm.
you have a smaller guy or female, doesn't really matter, but a guy 5'3", 140 some pounds,
Yeah.
and they're trying to lift their deadlift like Thor is because they idolize Thor, right? Like,
Yep. Yep.
cool, you want to be big and strong like him, and you're probably strong for your size. That's great, but you're kind of two different humans, right? I see a lot
Yeah.
of bench press guys
Yeah.
under 200 pounds trying to bench press like a dude who weighs 400 pounds.
Julius Maddox. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably want your technique to look like somebody your size just from leverages and other things. So when we get our base down, that really has to be number one. If we don't have a good technical base and we're always jumping around chasing somebody else's technique and form, the other X's and O's aren't going to work really well. I used to tell people in the Kabuki strength days, we're going to hit you with a 1-2 punch. And that's really what I do with Dream Team still, working with athletes. if we can tweak a couple things position wise, I don't like to talk technique, same thing for some people, but if we can tweak a couple things in your position, and now immediately you're moving better load, safer, longer term, and
Mm.
then we can hit the home run by adding good programming on top of that. Now the X's and O's are going to work, right? Now we're
Yeah.
really, really getting somewhere. And I think that's missed a lot. People just jump right in and think a new program or a new bench volume is going to save itself. Now,
Yeah.
to my main point on your question, I always share this with all coaches. So excited to see some coaches try this outside of just powerlifting who are on the call, right?
Yeah.
But strength
Yeah.
sports and even others as well for their own technique is where do you sneak that in? So I've got a very good eye for movement. I feel like that's one thing that
Mm.
God blessed
Hmm.
me with as a coach.
Yeah.
Some coaches struggle with seeing things, and the only way you're going to get that better is more time. I think all coaches should be looking at their own technique. I'm one of the
Mm.
coaches that say coaches should have coaches. And most of my
Mm.
career, I've been coached. I'm not currently getting coached, but up till a little while ago, I was.
Yeah.
I like to view everything on video from warm-ups to top sets. That's a very
Mm.
utilized
Mm.
tool that everybody can do. Coaches, right?
Yeah.
As long as
I
the
like that.
school can do it, if I can utilize my phone and show them back slow-mo or real time, we're going to see things a little bit different the second time, right?
Mm. Hmm.
So the technique hack I have is one, you have to get better eye for movement. You don't have to be as good as me because here's the hack, try something slightly different. And this hit me a long time ago with working with a client. And I noticed because I track data that all of a sudden our secondary bench day, where we would do some close grip and some other things that wasn't related to competition, all of a sudden,
Mm.
let's say she has a 185-pound competition bench. All of a sudden, we're doing 185 for 5 to 6 reps close grip. And I'm like, So I ask a question. I'm like,
Yep.
hey, athlete, did you notice X? They said,
Yeah.
yes. I'm like, cool. Guess what your new competition grip whip is? And they're like, it blew my mind when I heard it from them. They're like, but I can't. Well, why can't you? Well,
Yeah.
I thought
Okay.
that powerlifting misconception. I thought I had to be as big of an arch as possible and really wide because that's the powerlifting grip. I hate hearing stuff like that. Well, this is the
Yeah.
CrossFit stance.
Yeah.
So even if you're working with football players and you have a suspicion, hey, I think this athlete's too wide, sometimes they just
Hmm.
don't buy in because we're strong and we're meatheads, right? So we think we
Yeah.
know better. Coaches, try a different stance. Do it on the
Yeah.
secondary day. Sneak it in there. Sneak that grip in on a day where it's not a primary movement. If you like speed work, try it on their speed work. If you track data and that starts excelling at a faster rate than their
Yeah.
normal strength training is, then you ask the athlete the question, all of a sudden it's their idea to try the new position. They've bought in, and you're just the
Yep.
smart coach behind the scenes going, I knew it. I could have done that. And here's the other cool part. If
Yeah.
you're wrong and their squat stance isn't better by this small adjustment, you didn't mess with their main strength day and it was worth a try, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Really
for
cool hack
sure.
that I've seen amazing results with in all sports.
I love that because, I had some coaching with a guy, his name's Adam Miller, and he's kind of talking about like, look, like maybe this gives you the best mechanical advantage over the bar because it's a short distance or whatever, but it's not the best biomechanical advantage that you can secure, right? And that comes through a lot of experimentation and getting the most amount of muscle to kind of contract against the bar there. So to kind of go back to what you kind of initially said there that stuck out of my mind is like this concept of position, right? And what that means. And from my point of view with like what you said, it's effectively finding the physics-based element here of like where are we getting the most amount of output with the best kind of like, biomechanics that we can there. So like can you unravel that like coaching eye a little bit that you're talking to having that gold standard of and in terms of position, like what you're looking at, what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Let's start there. Yeah.
So the next great hack that I'll give all coaches and athletes listening to is this is why you have to see yourself. Even if you're getting coaching, in my opinion, even if your coach is in the weight room with you, and I know some schools and high schools and whatnot, you can't have a phone, so it is what it is. But in a perfect
Sure.
world, if one or three coaches are working with 20 athletes in a football room, right, in a
Hmm.
weight room, you're never going to get personal one-on-one full attention. There's going to be times when
Impossible.
eyes aren't on you. And if
Yep.
coach is telling you something or you're coaching yourself and you're like, hey, I know that in my deadlift, I set up with my shoulders rounded and my head forward, and we need to break that habit so I have better spinal alignment. If
Mm.
you're not viewing that until you're top set and you're like, man, that feels bad today. Let me look at it or let me wave coach over. You just lost all of the opportunities to fix that, right?
Yeah.
So my hack, it has to start with getting eyes on the movement, whether it's your coach, video, yourself, a friend, doesn't really matter. There's even some AI apps that are coming out and whatnot, pretty cool that
Yeah.
at least tell you like, hey, your knees caved in. You may not have felt that. But
Yeah.
deviation of position. I wish somebody would have gifted me this early on in my career because I was chasing perfection. And I say this to my athletes all the time, deviation of position. A good example, let's keep this guy here.
Yeah.
Say this is my bench press. My elbows
Yep.
are underneath the bar. I'm pressing well. Is it
Yep.
perfect? Maybe, maybe not. We're not going to go down
Yeah.
perfection right now. Good rep. That's exaggerated. My
Yeah. Yeah.
elbow started in good position. On the way up, it changed. It deviated from its initial position and here.
Right.
That's going to lead to problems in my shoulder if I do that enough times.
Yep.
But power output just went through the floor, right? So
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
if it's
Well.
just my 8 sets of 2 speed work at
Mm.
50% with bands, I'm not producing as much, even if I don't go up in weight. I'm not producing optimal output, optimal horsepower into that barbell. So I'm not getting
Yeah.
optimal results. Another way
Right.
I like to talk about it that I think makes good sense for everybody is in my
Yeah.
setup, right?
Yep.
So I start with pretty good position. I unrack the bar. I
Yep.
move things, and I know I'm exaggerating here, right? But I move
Yep.
things around, including my head and my back, and then I set back up. If that movement, if that deviation of position did not elicit a benefit, stop doing it, right?
Yeah.
Taking 4 steps back in the squat. I ask athletes, did that help you? Well, no, then don't do it. It's a waste of position. It's a waste of
Yeah.
time, energy, and effort.
Yeah.
I like lifters to lift robotically. When you're on the football field, look like a Heisman Trophy winner. That's awesome. When you're boxing, flow and move.
Yeah.
But there's times when we should be completely locked down and look like a robot. So
Yeah.
again, coach doesn't have to have the best eyes or the best tech in the industry.
Mm.
Was there a deviation of position? And then I like to talk metronome with that. A beginner
Yeah.
athlete, they might be all over hell and back. Can I
Yeah.
just start to shorten up that movement? So now
Yeah.
pretty soon we're looking at a half inch of deviation under the barbell versus they used to have 4 inches when it gets heavy. We're headed the right way. Their power output's going up. They're getting stronger. So
Yeah, and I mean that's a really cool way to think about it there. Maybe you've heard this from some of the baseball guys you were talking to. But like when it came to like getting a pitcher to throw accurately a 100 mile per hour fastball or whatever pitch they were throwing, like there's the element of just slinging it and getting as much velocity as you can regardless of the technique. But then there's like, okay, we got to back 20% off so you don't like need Tommy John in like
yeah,
a few months here. And like I feel like powerlifting it's the same thing as like throwing a pitch in that regard. Like there's what your body can do, and then there's what your body should do. So like, and it sounds like those things as an athlete gets more advanced, they kind of tighten up and eventually, right? Elite athletes make that one and the same,
yep.
right? Like the efficiency and the output are there. So like
We
how
hope
do
they
you
do. Sometimes
yeah,
it gets
yeah,
missed, but that should be the coach's ultimate goal.
yeah, yep, yeah. We hope they do is a very important caveat there. But I'm curious, yeah, like on the journey from like beginner to pro, like, like these elite totals, like what do you find is kind of some of the stuff that like you're specifically working on with your athletes to like get them to that level? Because obviously, like from my point of view, I see there's a massive difference between putting 1,000 pounds on your back and putting 500 pounds on your back and putting 200 pounds on your back,
Yep.
regardless of what, like, what that is in terms of like your relative strength and such. So, like, I'm curious, like, how are you handling those like world class lifters compared to your more beginner ones?
Um, for any of my elite lifters on here or listening, you guys can plug your ears real quick. Some of the pro fighters that I've worked with, pro CrossFitters, best. I've been blessed to work with, obviously a large handful of the strongest athletes in the entire world. My own company, Kabuki Strength Team USA. Sometimes they are the
Yep.
hardest people to work with because they think they know, right?
Yeah.
And they think, well, this is the way I move. Unfortunately, a lot of these elite athletes coach themselves and are not good at getting coaching because after a while they're just like, this isn't working for me. I don't want to
Mm.
do it that way. So coming on as a coach, what Team USA taught me, um, probably the best gift as a coach I learned from it. I tried to meet people where they're at before, but sometimes we have to change our verbiage and trick them into again the close grip versus wide grip, right? Sometimes we have to let it
Hmm.
be their decision. Unfortunately, a lot of the top athletes across
Yeah.
multiple sports, if they're already at that world class elite level, it takes a serious injury for them to
Hmm.
seek help. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate because we would want them to not have a serious injury, and hopefully they never do. But a lot of them, when they're beat up and banged up and they keep running headfirst into a wall, it's like, fine, like, okay, I need other eyes on this, right? I need something else.
Hmm.
So beginners are awesome because they're hungry and they want to learn and they listen, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a real thing for all coaches, whether you're elite, just getting in the game, you've got to find a way to talk to your athletes. When I was a young baby coach, I wish somebody would have helped me with that. There's so
Hmm.
many athletes I know I turned away because I just didn't say it to them the right time, the right way, or forced an answer that they weren't ready to hear instead of meeting in the middle and agreeing to work on it, right? But
Mm.
the second part of that, I really truly, that's why I'm such a stickler on position and deviation of position. Head position in the squat's huge for me. And I don't care what
Yeah.
athlete you are, right? You could be a
Yeah.
football
Yeah.
player,
Yeah.
volleyball player. This movement is excessive. To me, some days we're just tight. So here versus here, I'm probably going to be okay with that for even the best lifters in the world. The
Mm.
heavier weights we start to handle, especially when under stress and fatigue, and again, this could be a volleyball player squatting 300 pounds as a one rep max. If
Hmm.
they're at the end of the season and they have life stress, family stress, right? Their brain's not in it the same. They have a bunch of physical stress from the season going on. We might allow a little bit more deviation, right? But we have to tighten that up because that's when
Mm.
injuries happen and they get hurt. Um,
Yep.
and then really just sticking to systems. And I still teach the same way that I truly believed when I stepped in that first Duffin movement system. Breathing and bracing, spine mechanics
Hmm.
has to be number one. Then I look at foot, then I look at hip and shoulder complex.
Yeah.
And throughout all those, if we maintain good positions when we lift, even
Yep.
snatch, clean and jerk, whatever it is, now we can really utilize our coaching skills. If
Yeah.
those things aren't dialed in, it doesn't matter how good or how new the beginner lifter is to the world elite. We really can't dial things in until
Mm.
they start moving the same way every time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, can we so you said spine mechanics. Then
Yep.
I believe was it shoulder and then it was ankles, feet?
Breathing, bracing, spine mechanics, number one.
Yep.
Foot is next,
Foot was next.
then hip and shoulder. And the
Okay.
reason I look at foot next is think about
Yeah.
how
Oh yeah.
much we're doing in the gym.
Yeah.
We bench press, we're using leg drive. We overhead press, push press, split
Yep.
jerk, leg drive, leg drive, leg drive. Boxing,
Yeah.
leg drive, wrestling, playing pool in a pool hall, right? Pickleball
Yeah.
is popular. Anything but ring gymnasts are pretty much using your feet. Somebody tried to tell
Yeah.
me equestrian once, and I believe you, but I would also argue your feet are in stirrups. You still have something pressing you. You get it,
Yeah.
right?
You're
So,
you're
but
you're
like,
using them.
right? And that's
Yeah.
why that's so important is energy transfer.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to unpack each of those. So, like, talk to me about like the spine mechanic side of things, like, obviously sloppy head position sounds like it's
Yep.
one of the first things to look at. But like what is the point B that we're looking for here?
So neutral spine. And
Okay.
that's going to change in two positions. And I know a lot of people will argue this in the strength realm, and that's fine. I'll die on this hill. One that we can agree on, though, is bench press.
Okay.
If you can have a massive global arch, you'll
Yep.
probably have the opportunity to put up more weight because you have a shorter range of motion. Most
Yep.
people, if they did a three board press, right, the board presses,
Yep.
are going to lift more. So if I
Yeah.
can flat back or arch that much, I'm probably going to lift more.
Yep.
So, but then when we look at things like I'm working with a former CrossFitter right now. She's
Mm.
dipping into the powerlifting realm. Super strong. Overhead press, a lot of weightlifters, especially coming from CrossFit. I don't ever make it to sound like I'm bashing CrossFit because I came from that background, so I get to a little bit, right? And I was a
Yeah.
USAW coach and owned a CrossFit gym, so reminding people of that. But a lot of CrossFitters, I feel
Yep.
like they're overhead weightlifting, they're trying to add too much arch in. And sometimes again goes back to
Yep.
my certain point, like they're looking at some of their idols who they like to watch in strongman, and they're looking at a
Mm.
big dude put up a big log, and they're like, hey,
Yep.
if he does that overhead, it's okay if my overhead press looks like this. Well, yes and no to a certain extent, right? So there's those couple places where we know we're going to agree or disagree on spinal position.
Sure, of course.
The deadlift is another one. A lot of big pullers right now start sumo or conventional with a fairly rounded upper back. And I've worked with a couple of them that are all-time world record holders, and they refused to try something different because when they did, their deadlift went down at first. I promise if they stuck through it, they would have a more rigid spine. In the future, they would be able to lift more weight. So those two areas make it difficult for some athletes and coaches
Yep.
going back and forth. But ideally, what we would do is hold neutral position. And it's so funny when I tell people neutral spine and they stand up for me and they're in a pretty good position. And then they go to squat and they're here or here.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
stand tall, be neutral. They get the bar off their back, whether it's heavy or not. It could just be the bar. They get the bar off their back and they show you awesome standing posture. Yes, you cannot stand like this with 1,000 pounds on your back. It'll fall off. There's going to have to
Yeah.
be some sense of forward flexion, but
Yeah.
always looking for our best neutral alignment.
Yeah.
Fighters get this really well. I used to demonstrate this in person. So, any
Mm.
wrestling coaches on here or guys who've done MMA, if
Yeah.
I get snapped down and I can get somebody's head, they can be
Yeah.
twice as strong as me and they
It
can't
don't
do anything.
matter.
I've
Yeah.
demonstrated before with like a 300-pound dude in the audience. As if I let him break my head and upper back posture, I can't stand up. If I lock in here and I'll pick him up and walk him around the room. I
Yeah.
didn't immediately get stronger. So I love that drill. I didn't take
Yeah.
a magic pill.
Nope.
I didn't do an awesome 3-year training block. I just changed
Yeah.
my spine mechanics and immediately got 3x stronger.
Yep. Yeah. 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 And you mentioned kind of an interesting point of like athletes kind of overextending versus flexing, and if they've patterned that neurologically, right, then they see kind of like this massive dip when they do it a different way. So do
Yep.
you think it's literally just a neurological patterning thing? And it's like, hey, like you just haven't done it this way, but over time, like if the ceiling was 980 pounds, well, now the ceiling is 1020, but you're gonna probably dip to 960,
Yep.
right, to get there. Is that kind of like what you think the
Yeah,
reason
and
is
with
there?
lifting big numbers, you're always going to have a little bit of in some of these positions momentum and shorter range of motion, right? So
Yep. Yep.
if I can yank the bar off the floor and it gets a little momentum, that might help me. Where if I stop the yank
Mm.
and I really take tension out of a bar on a deadlift and then
Yeah.
stand up, at first I'm not going to have a huge heave in the bench press. Well, you're sinking the bar 3 or 4 inches lower than if you just kept your belly big, but you're getting
Right.
momentum. So your body's used to that momentum. We take the momentum away,
Hmm.
you're going to get stronger and you're going to be healthier, but it dips down. And with spine, I've helped so many people with back injuries. I had a long-standing back injury that was able to
Mm.
do some cool stuff. I deadlifted. My top deadlift in the gym with straps was 805. I think I hit it at
Sick.
like a 210 body weight, something like that,
Freak. Yeah,
120.
that's awesome.
So I've got grip problems. I can't match that on the platform ever,
Yeah.
right? But talking spine mechanics, pretty strong for a guy my size. I'm not breaking all-time world
Hmm.
records with that, but I can move some weight. I was
Yeah.
able to
Yeah.
do that and a bunch of cool stuff on a spine that was injured from many years of fighting,
Wow.
not knowing how to lift well, and the original herniation was from a car crash, so not anything cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Training with good spine alignment. Yes, I did have to have back surgery and the disc finally ruptured. But instead of having
Mm.
it at the time of the injury, I was able to have a really cool career, do some fun, heavy stuff
Yeah.
for 10 years with that. I don't want to see athletes lose their career, right? Have to quit boxing.
No way.
College, they never made it to pro ball because of a back injury because they were lifting stupidly. That's the other
Hmm.
reason why I truly believe it's number one. But keeping the spine safe because it sucks to have back surgery. I know I've been there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I believe you. Having not had it, not something I want to experience myself. But now I have questions about, you kind of see some of these like working other positions, right? Like non-neutral spine positions, like things like a Jefferson curl, things like a reverse hyper, things like, all these accessory movements, which obviously, like, I think it goes without saying, like, you're not loading probably as much weight as you are axial
Yep.
load with, as the power lifts. But like, how do you think about that non-neutral spine, that rotation, that extension flexion based work in the context of the big three?
Yeah, so it really goes to sport. I think something else that I wish I would have stuck with earlier. I heard it early on, but I got a little wild in training things. The rule of specificity, right?
Yeah.
If I'm training
Hmm.
a power lifter, but that also becomes being a good coach and listening to their goals. If the power lifter, regardless of age, is like, I want to be the best in the world and I'm going to dedicate everything for the next 5 years to lift as much weight as humanly possible. I don't
Hmm.
care about performance enhancing drugs. I don't care about
Yep.
my livelihood. I'm going to quit my job. Like I'm going all in.
Yep.
They're going to get a little bit different treatment than somebody who's even 90% that crazy. And they say, hey, I'm going all in, but my ultimate goal is to be able to still play with my grandkids in 10 years. Right.
Hmm.
Okay. So, now you added some life goals in there. Cool. So now we can play with a couple other things that I'm not going to say might take away from our top end strength. But if that's truly all I care about is top end strength, especially with like powerlifting, the big three, I'm going to do everything I can, and anything that gets in the way is a useless exercise. Or if somebody's
Mm.
like, cool, I want to be big and strong, but I also want to have good cardio, and I used to do CrossFit and I like it. Okay, well, now I have to keep them entertained, plus a life goal, plus a strength goal. They get
Mm.
more variation of the things that you talked about. Um,
Love it.
it's easy for coaches to go down a rabbit hole. So I want to throw that out there too. When we talk spine alignment, yes, I said neutral spine is the absolute best for force transfer. 100% I'll
Yeah.
die on that hill. But I also am not stupid. I've trained strongman. You cannot have a neutral spine and pick up 500-pound rock up off the floor.
No,
It's
not
not a
happening. Yeah.
thing that exists. You can't
Yep.
even pick up a 100-pound sandbag with a neutral spine. It's
Yeah.
not a task that can be done. So in that instance, again, I go back to specificity. What are we doing? If we're learning to
Mm.
deadlift, let's deadlift correctly. I don't need to do a deficit deadlift with as much weight as possible if I'm only a power lifter from my toes, standing on an 8-inch box. That's not a drill I ever need to do to risk my spine, in my opinion. Now,
Hmm.
somebody that wants to play with sandbags, yeah. A golfer that needs rotation, even though they power lift as well, if I never give them rotation,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it under an 800-pound squat, right? But if I
Yeah.
never
No.
let them play with wood chops, sandbags, I'm doing a disservice because that's their side hobby and their main sport is powerlifting. So once
Hmm.
we understand the secondary goals, life, fitness, movement, right, then we can play a little bit more. You're
Beautiful.
a guy that can pick up a 500-pound rock probably has a massive deadlift. And that's the other thing people don't think about.
Yeah.
Dudes that are picking up those Atlas stones that big, their deadlift, they may not be the world champion, but they're probably pulling all of 800, some of them with straps, 900, 1,000 on the right barbell and right plate setup.
Oh
So
yeah.
500 pounds might be about 50%, right?
Yep.
That makes it a little safer doing awkward movements. Sandbags
Yep.
are a great place for everybody to start with that because it's the fatigue. and the awkwardness that's going to limit the
Yep.
amount of weight. But yeah, training, and then as coaches, again, I don't care if you're coaching football, MMA, jiu-jitsu, volleyball, powerlifting only. Sometimes it's cool just to make your people athletes. I was talking with
Hmm.
an all-time world record holder the other day. I was doing some box jumps in the gym. He's like, I need to add those back in. It's really fun doing something athletic. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
okay to do stuff, right?
Yeah.
Make athletes good at being an athlete. It's cool.
I love that, dude. Cool. Well, so that I feel like that's a good spot on spine. Like, love to transition into now talking like foot ankle complex. I know. So I'll tell a little story here too. Is I remember you specifically kind of talking some channel with Kabuki about like that eagle talon, eagle claw with the foot. I
Yep.
remember I was like 19, 20 years old, and I was like, huh, okay, well, I'm gonna go try that in the gym today. And lo and behold, you know what you're talking about. And it added some weight to my squat. And so, that was something I kind of encouraged people to do. But like that was really my starting point with learning a lot of that and, mobilizing the feet and doing all these different things. So I really want to hear, kind of your thoughts on this element and wherever you want to start, man. Let's do it.
Yeah. So the foot, right? Got
Yeah.
my shoe here. I still wear very minimalist shoes. This is what I
Yeah.
train in. It's what I walk around in. It's my thing because I believe in the foot being strong to do its job. I think mine was a little bit easier because where I trained kickboxing so many years
Yep.
barefoot
Yeah.
and training and fighting wrestling barefoot, I was doing a lot of strong work. But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean my foot was doing its job correctly. I was blown away in the first seminar. I was okay at breathing and bracing when I went through the first seminar with Kabuki I was talking about before I became a coach with them.
Hmm.
My footwork absolutely sucked. And I remember I used to be an equip lifter, so squatting in a
Yeah.
suit, right? And my squat stance, way out here, super wide, like a lot of guys, was a young West Side
Yep.
fan. Push your feet
Yeah.
out as hard as you can. And not that that's a bad cue, but it gets misunderstood. You can
Yeah.
push your foot laterally as hard as you want to, for all I care. Same thing in a sumo deadlift, if it's way out here by the plates, but not to the detriment where your foot starts to roll.
Yeah. Good luck if that does too.
Yep. And it's crazy because I still see some equipped lifters and I can see their toes coming up in big 1,000-pound squats and they're rolling to the outside of their foot. It's a recipe for disaster, number one. But let's go back to power output, right?
Yeah. It's
I
waste.
would love to see even a really good hockey player. It'd be dangerous, so I'm going to be careful with what I'm saying here. Let's put them in a squat rack with some really good safety spotters and raise the arms up. But I want to see somebody squat their max back squat on ice skates. And we'll even let it be a hockey player, a speed skater who lives on those things. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not a
Yeah.
stable enough platform. I love extremes talking with coaches because
For
sometimes they
sure.
just don't think or talk to their athletes about that. The
Yeah.
bigger and wider, the flatter the foot is, the better job it'll do. The other analogy I always give, and hopefully this helps the coaches on here explain the importance of foot to somebody one day. Think of the big drag cars, right? Our top fuel dragsters with those monster tires that are as
Yep.
tall as I am sitting here and
Yeah.
2 feet wide. Imagine
Yeah.
if we put Prius tires on that vehicle.
Not
It's
gonna go
never
well.
even going to leave the line. The tires
Yeah.
will actually blow up before they it can't. There's too much power.
Yeah.
We have these big, strong engines, right? We're athletes, our legs, we dominate in the weight room, and then we're stuck on ball tires with bad alignment. That
Hmm.
wouldn't work for a race car, but we don't pay attention in the gym. So simply to close out foot, here's another place where coaches don't pay enough attention. And I feel like all you have to do is just record the foot. And sometimes there's a lot going on in a squat. I've literally put phone on a very short, like those little tiny desk tripods right by somebody. Zoom in right by the foot, and then you can watch the rest of the squat and then show the athlete, I'm telling you, your heel's coming up. And they're like, oh my God, I never felt it. Yeah, look, it came up a half inch, right? Then we get
Hmm.
into shoes too. So many people think that weightlifting shoes are squat shoes. It's funny. It's one of my pet peeves. Like shouldn't actually have been called powerlifting. It should be strength lifting. There's no power
Hmm.
output. There's no speed demand. The slower I
Yeah.
grind something out, the less power I have. So
Yep.
Olympic lifting is a power sport. Anyways,
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I
shoes.
agree. Yep.
They're weightlifting shoes. They're not squat shoes. They were designed to catch the snatch and the clean in the bottom of the squat.
Yeah. Yeah.
People
Yeah.
adopt them and think it's a must. They also think that it'll fix ankle mobility. What's crazy is
Yeah,
if you raise your heel up and you always squat in those shoes year after year after year, you might have actually decreased your ankle mobility, not increased it.
for
Yes, it can
sure.
help some people squat deeper, and
Yep.
they mask problems. I've pulled all-time world record squatters out of their shoes because you cannot see what's going on in a really hard, flat weightlifting shoe. And you
Yep.
look at them without their shoe on, you're like, you squat 830 pounds and you can't squat 225 with your foot flat on the floor?
Crazy.
Imagine again
I've
your
seen it too.
ceiling, what
Yeah.
we'll do. And
Yeah.
and for our ball coaches, right? Or like track coaches on here, we are all lifting in the weight room. And the
Hmm.
principles go back to the same thing, right? If
Yes.
I can get you stronger in the weight room and you have good technique and a good program, you're going to run faster on the field, right?
Hmm.
A lot of
Yeah.
athletes have been through ankle and foot trauma too. I know I've broke this one a
Oh,
couple
God,
times.
yeah.
Ankle,
Yep.
foot's been broken multiple times kicking. I don't know how
Same.
many
Yep.
sprains I've had.
Yep. Yeah, a
I should
million.
probably pay attention to the stability of that joint, right? So we need a little extra care in feet.
That's interesting, and I'd love to get into the training interventions because an element that I worked with a lot of my high school football players, right, was hey, we like, and I learned this kind of from like the West Side geared lifting, just equipped related stuff is like going and like sprinting in a cleat is like putting on a squat suit. You know what I mean? And like, boom, you're like taking off and like it's better. But if you feel like you are like piss weak, super fucking slow, and everything's really weird when you're barefoot, there's a disconnect there between brain and feet. And so we started doing plyos barefoot. We started doing, a
Awesome.
little bit of like barefoot sprinting, barefoot running, and then kind of adopted cleats, as the closer we got to the season. And man, we were dropping most kids, the average was like 3/10 of a second every 3 months was dropping off the 40 for like everyone. That was the average of the team. So like I like swear by this stuff and I'm very passionate about it. Now, what do you kind of think in the context of powerlifting? Like, how do we strengthen that? Is it as simple as just saying fuck the shoes, Or are we doing like, something like really specific, really different with that?
Yeah, for most people, again, the cool part is it goes back to specificity. It's
Yeah.
like breathing and bracing. We skipped over this, which is totally fine. But the concept,
Yeah,
like
sure.
working with, I do collaborations with Tupud, and I was just at Athex.
Yeah.
I've been to the CrossFit Games. Most people don't know how to use a belt, and even we're talking some of the best
Yeah.
powerlifters as well.
Yeah, dig into it, man. Yeah, I want to
Forget
hear
the
that
weight
stuff.
room and football
Yeah.
athletes or baseball players like, oh, I should never use a belt. I just wrote an ebook that'll be out here
Mm,
pretty soon
sick.
for Tupud, and there's three or four studies in there, good collegiate backed studies that show when the abs, core, obliques, low back, even they tested multiple parts in different studies, are hooked
Hmm.
up to electrical device and we can read the activation. There's more
Hmm.
activation when you wear a belt. So
Yeah.
I don't care if you're a baseball player and you're doing squats on a safety squat bar, even if it's only 225, if I teach you to use a belt well and you have good foot mechanics, the power output through your quads is going to be better. Now, when you go to
Boom.
crack home runs, you're stronger. I don't understand why we miss some of these things in the world of strength and conditioning. Let's look
Mm,
at what the best athletes do well and let's mirror some of their stuff, right? You don't
love
have to
that.
be competition plates on a power bar, but you should squat probably like a weightlifter or like a power lifter, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
same thing goes to the foot. People think that, well, I need to do something extra. And sometimes, yeah, if it's ankle injury, something like that, you do.
Sure.
The correlation to the belt is spend more time in the belt. And most people spend less time in the belt because they want to get their core stronger. Well, we're already doing so much in the gym. Most of my power lifters don't do a ton of core training because they're breathing and bracing well with a belt on, and they don't need to have a strong crunch. We don't do this while deadlifting, right?
Yeah.
They need to be able
Yeah.
to hold a rigid position very, very
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
We're doing that. The cool part about how do you get your foot stronger? Get your shoe off and train barefoot. Bend over rows. I love hearing plyos and sprint warm ups. Like,
Yeah.
just do the things you're already doing, do them better without protective equipment on. And your
Yeah.
body's forced to do its job. Sometimes there needs to be intervention from a coach because we could have bad foot mechanics and you need to teach
Sure.
the athlete this part of your foot needs to be pressed down. But just do the
Sure.
things you're already doing better with less supportive
Yep.
gear. Then you put the cleats on or the squat suit
Yep.
Ceiling just got raised again.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think it's the difference of it's like getting something out of the cleat, getting something out of the suit. The biology still has to like be able to lean into that. You know,
Yep.
you have to know how to work that gear. So that's yeah, I love that.
All the way
Excellent.
back to my original point, though, right? Like your
Yeah.
fundamentals. And these fundamentals get looked over, not to knock Instagram again, but like kids
Knock
see
it.
the next flashy thing on Instagram. They're like, oh, he's big and strong. I'll follow his program for $30. Well, yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool, but it's not addressing anything you're doing wrong. And you're going to hit the
Hmm.
same ceiling. And you could have taken an old West Side program or a 531 or Smolov and probably got 50 pounds as well, but you're still going to be the same crappy athlete, just a little bit stronger. Sorry,
Yeah.
not addressing the fundamental issue. So,
Love
and then
that,
when we
dude.
jump into hip and shoulder, those are actually not to
No, please.
take away from them, but they're
Yeah.
actually really easy. I've seen, and I say this
Yep.
at all the USPA seminars, private seminars I do, we spend so much time teaching breathing and bracing, and then a little bit less on foot, and then we get to hip and shoulder, and everybody's like, "Did we not have time for that?" I'm like, "No, you did it well. You fixed it because here's the thing:
Yep.
giant ball and socket joints, right?
Yep.
Giant ball and socket joints. This one's more complex because it floats on the rib cage. However, when we're here doing our thing, if this is organized and stable and the foot is stable, now I don't have this thing going on. I've made a
Yeah.
video about it multiple times, and I know some of my athletes like to use it. So if they're listening, my bad, you hear me yell at it again. The the band around the knees, I think, is the stupidest thing in the gym. And I
It's
think it's
really
the
bad.
stupidest warm up.
Yep.
Your knee doesn't bend this way. If it does on the
Yep.
football field, you're not walking off. Okay,
Yeah, good
like
luck. We'll see you
we're
next
going to
season.
surgery.
Yeah.
That doesn't help your ankle or your hip, right? People think it does. When we're squatting in the gym, we're not doing abduction. The glute medius does not do this when we squat,
No,
right? It's a
none of it.
stabilizer that helps keep our hips from shifting. So it needs to be an isometric contraction, not a huge contraction. So
Yeah.
if we quit putting the band around our knees and we just address the foot, the hip is instantly more stable. If
Hmm.
we stabilize the weight on our spine, the hip is immediately more stable. If we have stability all the way up, now the shoulders are also more stable. So if we address those basics well, and then we just watch position, pressing overhead, throwing, hitting, whatever we're doing, now things are quite a bit easier. So,
Mm. Yeah, and I think I'd like to dive into the biomechanics maybe of like how does that spine position like impact the femur and the shoulder and obviously like the rib cage element there because I think that's a really important things for coaches to know and understand. So
yep.
like what do you got on that front?
Yeah, so looking at a squat real quick,
Yeah, please.
we change we change the lever, right? We change the lever
Yep.
point of when this is rounded forward. If I'm looking straight down and I drop this off my shoulders, it would be in front of my feet.
Yes.
And yes, I cannot squat 1,000 pounds perfectly upright, but here's a pretty good position, right?
Yeah.
If I'm here, I'm pretty upright. This is probably over my arch.
Yep.
I gave the lever a different point. Unless you're in an SSB bar where the weight is in a different position or like a
Yep.
long chamber bar, but that's
Yep.
designed to make things different. Same
Yep.
thing, we'll talk about it in all the pulls real quick. Deadlift,
Hmm.
my snatch off the ground, my clean off the ground. If I'm here on my tippy toes, my shoulders on my own body are acting as weight. My spine is not assisting me, it's putting more weight onto the barbell, right?
Yep.
So the biomechanics are either going to assist you or they're going to get in your way. And it's mind blowing how many people I see that just don't have a good rule. Like, and this used to be the old coach in me, so I get it. I'm going to fix your foot. I'm going to fix your shoulder. I'm going to fix your bar path. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix this. And I'm
Yep.
bouncing around the body like a pinball machine to what I see. If I saw you deadlift right now, I might pick five things apart in my brain because I have ADD, might still bounce around like a pinball.
Yep.
However, I'm just going to take that information and go, cool, what's my checklist? Breathing, bracing, spine mechanics.
Yep.
I've got so many athletes so much better. And then the cool thing is like, wow, all of a sudden, his hip, his shoulder, her this, her that is no longer an issue because we fixed this and it went up or
Hmm.
down the chain and immediately other problems got corrected. Now I
Yeah.
just seem like a great coach because I said one thing and fixed five problems versus
Yeah.
pinballing trying to fix everything.
Yeah. 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 100%. It's like, yeah, okay, I've got like the shoulder impingement thing. Well, is it just that you like are overextending your thoracic spine with everything that you do? And it has actually nothing to do with the shoulder at that
Yep.
point. That's just
You
where
don't
you
know how to
feel it.
seat your shoulder because you're trying to catch your snatch here.
Yep.
Yes, you're going to have
Yeah.
shoulder problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck. Yeah. 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 Well, I love kind of what we're talking about with that stuff because I do think that the shoulders and the hips are like the feedback mechanism for it, like your hands, your feet, and how well your spine is kind of actually moving in that space. So like, you mentioned the bench, obviously, like looking for that arch and kind of finding that like, but do you feel like there's a scenario where like a neutral spine bench, if someone worked it, could in theory be pressing more because of that nature there, or no?
Yeah, for sure. And working with Dr. Snell, he was out of Portland when we were with Kabuki. We were blessed to be able to work with him. A lot of my own personal training, physical training, was with him. He did all my
Yep.
injuries, stuff like that. He had a big belief that if we spent more time in a neutral pressing position, that athletes' shoulders would be healthier. And as long as they also pressed in an arch, they would get better, right? So it'd be like
Mm.
a power lifter pressing wide grip and close grip. Well, maybe you should just have some flat back time, right? A
Hmm.
lot of people on the floor press, and they're not right or wrong. Most of my athletes, if they're going to floor press, I'll let them arch. But a floor
Yeah.
press can be a great time just to go flat back. You already are
Yeah.
killing leg drive. Let's kill
Yep.
that. And now let's just
Yeah.
press harder, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Getting
Work on the
outside,
horsepower.
I really like the idea of this is the way I used to coach in my CrossFit gym.
Mm.
I'm going to look at what weightlifters do and I'm going to match them for our weightlifting. I'm going to look at how strongman pick up rocks, and that's how we're going to do our sandbag work. I'm not
Hmm.
going to run like a power lifter. I'm going to try to match the stride of a marathon runner.
Hmm.
I'm looking for all the specialty sports. I feel like, and this is one of my gripes with CrossFit, what I saw personally, and not the organization, but with the methodology of coaching.
Hmm.
Coaches kind of want to bastardize weightlifting and deadlifting.
Hmm.
And like, so a lot of
Yeah, dude.
CrossFitters have kind of an okay deadlift and kind of an okay clean, but they have never really mastered either. And it's
Yep.
just this hybrid thing that they do for a bunch of reps. And they're really not that good at top end strength. And when we get them
Hmm.
on the clean, snatch, or deadlift, and if we got that better, everything goes up. Their WOD times, their
Yeah.
recovery time, their injuries go down. It's crazy, right?
Well, you
So
look at Matt Frazier and Tia Toomey, and it's like they had dominance for years. I think it had something to do with the fact that their weightlifting background
yep,
was like pretty essential to their success there. Like, because at the end of the day, like you kind of mentioned it, like yeah, 500%, or excuse me, 500 pounds is 50% of a 1,000 pound squat. Like, well, okay, if you're doing an AMRAP with 225 on snatch and your best is friggin' 405 pounds, like it's pretty
you're doing a
light. It's pretty
lot
easy.
less work.
Yeah, yeah,
Power
you're
output's
doing a
through the
lot less work.
roof.
Yep.
Your time under tension's less. You're not grinding things out. You don't even have to dip into your engine yet.
Yeah.
But on that same note, I also think there's a time back to your question, the Jefferson deadlift, the
Yeah.
sandbag. Like, if I want to be a good pressing athlete for my entire life, even if I compete in powerlifting and I want to until I'm, you know,
Yep.
done on this earth, but I really like pressing and being a strong presser, I should probably dumbbell press. I should probably flat back. I should
Yeah.
probably floor press. I should definitely overhead incline. I just need to be good at the art of pressing, right?
Hmm.
Fighters, I love my fighters to be pressing. But a lot of coaches don't again think of specificity. If I shoot from here and I'm coming up to your jaw, even if we're the same height, that's an
Yep.
incline press. I
Yeah.
used to make my fighters do a lot of incline pressing. Sometimes we're punching from bad positions. This is not
Yeah.
how we bench press. but sometimes I punch from there, right?
Yeah.
So getting
Yeah.
in that position and pressing from a cable machine, a lot of coaches would be like, "What are you doing over there? That looks stupid." Well, their bench press is already stronger than the other fighters. They got strength. Now we're
Mm-hmm.
keeping shoulder healthy and
Yeah.
training for the things that actually happen as an athlete. Football
Yeah.
players, rugby players,
Yep.
wrestlers get in some really funky positions sometimes that they have to fight
Oh
out of.
yeah. Yeah.
It's just their sport. It's life.
For sure. Yeah, and I think this plays into, kind of one of the last questions I've got for you here, but like oh, it has to do with accessories, and I'm kind of like forming this as I talk here, but like you talk about specificity a lot. And I think a lot of things that people shit on powerlifting for, you're like, that's the frickin' point of the sport. So let's not like conflate variables here, right? So like the thing that stuck out to me that I'm remembering is like, hey, glute med, not really working on a squat. We don't need it to. It should be isometric and such, right? But to your point, like that you just made, like you're probably going to want to do some kickbacks. You're probably going to want to leverage that tissue at some point if you want a healthy hip over time. So, like, as we start to think about accessory work and, the overall like underlying health of the athlete, right? How do you kind of look at like an annual cycle and then like what are you kind of laying out in terms of considerations for all that work on the back end that isn't necessarily powerlifting specific?
Yeah, so a great place to follow up as another resource. Not to plug myself here, but
Please do.
the online coaching certification that we have
Hmm.
with the USPA. I've done
Yeah.
private seminars and other stuff as well. But as of right now, if a coach is like, "Hey, where do I want to follow up with this?" There's even if you're not coaching powerlifting, there's some stuff about in there that about reading the screen at a powerlifting meet that football coaches may never use, but
Hmm.
athlete arousal, game time, a lot of things will truly carry over. Back to my point of as coaches, right? If we really want to make athletes strong, I know too many track and ball coaches who are like, well, I don't need to train my athletes that way. They're not a power lifter. They don't need to arch. Okay,
Yeah.
but and to answer your question, there's a point in time for that. I don't
Yeah.
care if they're throwing javelin. If I can make their press stronger, if you have them
Hmm.
pressing, they will be a better throwing athlete, right? If
Yes.
I
Yeah.
can make X happen through their deadlift, even though you guys don't deadlift that much, I know they're now a faster sprinter, right? I know certain
Hmm.
things. So there is a time and place for that. I feel like that's why I like to highlight that when I had my CrossFit gym, I sought out the best of every area because I want to make them move like that. That's how I make a hybrid athlete. That's how I make
Yeah.
the best athletes in the world. Then we get into the
Hmm.
programming side of things. So in that seminar, it's a 20-hour online course. In that seminar, I teach programming in it, but I show four different athletes. Yes, they're all competitive powerlifters, but the strength program could literally be taken from that and put into a football program. You have one that's injured, one that's one of the most elite lifters of all time, one that's just a master's athlete who's busy. And then I had one other example in there. I forget what it is. So we're taking four different types of powerlifters. When you look
Yeah.
at the programming, you can really work wonders with people because of the time. It's easy for us because I can tell an athlete, hey, you're going to compete in the summer, or you have worlds in November. It's even easier when you're working with your football athletes because you know when the season is, right? They can't come up
Yeah.
to you like, hey, coach, I signed up for a competition next weekend. No, I know when
Yep.
the games are, guys, right? So
Yeah.
furthest away is when we get to play. The
Yep.
closer we get is specificity. The other great hack that I'll leave you with on that, and I really try to point home from all my coaching thousands and thousands of coaches through Kabuki Strength and the USPA, is we don't just pick random accessories. I'll talk squat
Yeah, of
real
course.
quick here.
Yeah.
If I have an athlete who needs a stronger upper back, I might start with a zombie front squat, far away
Yep.
from competition, whatever it is, because
Yep. Yep.
they're going to drop it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's
You
not going to
better
get them
clean
that
your back. Yeah.
strong because I cannot load it that much. Then maybe I go to an SSB squat. Then maybe I
Yep.
go to a tempo up squat. Then
Yep.
maybe I go to a pause squat.
Yep.
What I wouldn't do is say, hey, we're going to do sled work, plyos, then leg press, then hack squat, and then competition squat. They're too
Yeah.
far away. Point being, when I look for accessories, how can I load it close enough to the sport? The example of zombie front squat, SSB. Well, that's not how they compete, but it's great for off season and they're still squatting. They're going to get better
Hmm.
results from that than a quad extension, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, totally. Okay, I love that. I love that because one thing that I think, if we're looking at like the conjugate method and like West Side, stuff specifically, not saying West Side does this wrong, I'm saying that like coaches apply it wrong, is like just fucking any variation they can think of. You know what I mean? And it's like, hey, like actually the difference between a regular, competition bench and a two fingers in is actually pretty significant. You know
yep,
what I mean? And like the like layers of detail there where it's like, yeah, you just use seven different bars, but like, like that kind of I've seen it rob athletes of that like top end strength. Like, yeah, maybe you are better at pressing, which maybe for an athlete on the field gets you into those weird
100%.
corners. But for a power lifter, right, you're missing the point. And it's like, yeah, for my football guys, I'd rather have them hit 315 on six different bars than I would say like, you know, 335 on a straight bar by putting
Yep,
extra time into that. Right. But
100%.
that's so different from powerlifting. So like I really love the layers of specificity and like that I think is like probably the main thing that like I've taken away, today and that like kind of confirms it is like, dude, like you gotta get as close to the sport as you can. And I think it's yeah, curious to see like why a lot of coaches pick what they do. And a lot of times you see it kind of doesn't work. So I
Well, a lot of
appreciate that.
times too, it's because they're like, well, I just because I did. And that's where I'm
Yeah.
excited to. I'm probably giving a teaser to the coaches here and people who listen
Yeah.
to this later on. That's where I'm excited to get some of the best coaches powerlifting programs onto Bridge and some of
Yeah.
our variations on there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just need a variation. I'm like, man, I'm throwing everything at this person's quads. What am I going to do? And I see another coach doing heavy dumbbell front rack step ups. And I'm like, oh my God, I've been coaching for so long, I forgot about it. So it'll be
Yeah.
cool to see some of the football coaches. Maybe
Yeah.
they're doing quad extension leg press superset because they don't know what else to do. And they're like, I've never even seen a zombie front squat before. I love it. So when we get that released, it'll be really cool as another resource for the track coaches, the football coaches that are
Yeah.
on Bridge software now.
Yeah, hell yeah. No, I'm definitely excited about, kind of our budding partnership here. And to get more of that stuff on Bridge in the coach's hands. Like I think like, in terms of my questions, like where I'd like to wrap up so that we can, get into everyone else's questions here. Um, like you mentioned a lot about like loving data and loving tracking data, and I think that ties neatly into like what a lot of Bridge can do. But like I'm so curious because I think track and field's got its own set of data points. I think football has its own set of data points, basketball its own set. Like what data do you find to be most important for powerlifting? And how do you kind of incorporate that into like making database decisions as you evolve through the program?
Yeah, so we chatted a lot of strength and powerlifting related stuff here. Um, the future of powerlifting, I think, is what
Yep,
we called this episode, if I remember correctly.
for
And
sure.
and just to make sure everybody's listening feels like we got there because I think we did head that direction and
Yeah,
talked a lot of things. But and this
yeah.
isn't to knock any coaches who are still stuck in a spreadsheet or I know coaches I take on athletes sometimes are like, well, I just put it in a Word document.
Hmm.
And we're old school meatheads, and that kind of is okay because if the person doesn't want to get on Excel, doesn't want to get on Bridge, doesn't want to use
Hmm.
the other app softwares out there, they have a flip phone, they don't like to be on
Yeah,
tech in the gym, they want to be, that's fine. There's a place for that. But I always
yeah,
ask the coaches, well, how do you know their data is? Well, I like, and yes,
yeah.
if you have a good spreadsheet for yourself and you know how to pull reports, you can probably track it, but hopefully everything's named the same, right? Hopefully you have a
Hmm.
coding system. So for coaches who are listening out there that haven't taken that plunge yet, it'd be awesome to
Yeah,
see them on Bridge. But there's plenty of softwares out there. Like you have to have something that tracks your data. Look at cars these days, right? It's not a
yeah,
1950 rebuilt muscle car. There's computers
yeah,
for a reason and they go faster for a reason. To me, it's
yeah.
mind blowing the lack of data and tracking that strength coaches do, and not just powerlifting,
Oh
strongman,
yeah.
CrossFit for sure, football coaches. And again, yes, sometimes it's hard because you have 100 kids and they can't have cell phones, and how do you track their data?
Of course.
School doesn't have enough money for iPad. I get all those things, so we have to
Yep.
think outside the box. But the second biggest thing for me would be velocity data. And
Okay.
I really wish all coaches, I wish it was just something our sport would get over and adopt and just become the mainstream. I'm blown away that velocity data has, or velocity based training has not quadrupled, went 10x, even faster than the rate of strength sports and powerlifting growth. We
Yeah.
can't just keep going on how we feel. I hate
Hmm.
RPE.
Yeah, me too. Me
Perceived
too. Me too.
exertion. I look at an athlete and I'm like, put 50 pounds on the bar. Like, coach, I almost died. No, you could have hit that for 8. I don't care how it feels today. You're
Yeah.
just fine. We're going up. The more data that we have, the more important decisions we can make. The less
Yeah.
data we as athletes and coaches have, the less decisions we make. And then if we can have everything tracked in a software, because it's
Yeah.
2026,
Yeah.
we don't have to be great at coding or get on AI to have it make us a spreadsheet when your software can track all of our data. It's pretty
Y-
simple.
Yeah, totally, totally. And I mean, I'm really curious, like, from your point of view, like, obviously, I make the episode title, right? Future of powerlifting, then then drill down into some more prescient things. But I mean, it sounds like you think the future, right, really is tied to a excellence in like tracking data and excellence in understanding like what that means in the context of the sport. So like beyond that though, like where is the sport kind of like going on a trajectory that we need to be ready? Obviously, like with something like Bridge, right? But like what else are we thinking about in that respect?
Yeah, so the USPA has done a pretty good job of this the last couple of years.
Hmm.
There's a new software that I can chat a little bit about because it just got tested at a meet in California, so people probably know that it's coming out there. But even
Hmm.
like back to the softwares we use on the platform, they're old and they're archaic. To me, it's crazy. The sport of powerlifting is until it gets more, I don't want to say showmanship, but like until it starts to become more of a UFC event where you're tracking the lifters and there's a story behind it. It's not entertaining
Hmm.
to watch. There's a reason when you look at the Olympics, everybody's watching the sprinters go against each other and the
Yeah.
weightlifting ball is dead. It's sad, but it's true. It's a slow sport like powerlifting. So until we make it showier, and what's crazy with the IPF, right? Taking away the athletes' celebrations the other day. Like, are you serious? Dude just squatted 900 pounds and he can't be hyped about it. It just took him, 20 years to get there in his life. You
Right.
know,
So
he started
ridiculous.
lifting at 15 and finally hit it at 35. Right? But that's a big thing. And then when we can show more technology, I cannot wait for the day when powerlifting adopts more technology in the rules. And it should
Yeah.
already be there. I talk velocity a lot. Velocity companies can easily put it up there. They track millimeters. So the coach and the athlete's like, I did not double dip that bar. Well, it stopped and then sunk 5 millimeters and went back up. We're not overriding what the referees are saying. Or you know what? They call downward motion. If it
Yep.
goes to a pool or a jury, let's look on the screen. There was no downward motion. That's all the red lights were for. We confirmed. The NFL's done this for a long time on instant replays,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think that's going to be the future of powerlifting.
I
Coaches need
love
to
that.
buy into it. Athletes need to buy into it, and federations need to. We're stuck in the 1980s in our
Yep.
sport, and to get the growth we need to come into 2026. And there's some
And
exciting
I
stuff
just
happening.
can't believe, that every meet, every ref is perfectly locked in the entire 12-hour day potentially
Yeah.
of a meet. I just can't believe that.
Well,
Right?
to
So
be
like what
honest
you're
with you, it takes
yeah.
time for referees to get good. Like
Yeah.
I was in the sport for a long time, and I didn't start reffing as good, even though I was a great coach and good athlete. Like it
Yeah.
took time watching that, right?
Yeah, it's a skill. Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that tech will allow that augmentation to happen in a way. I love what you're talking about there. And I hope you guys, with USPA stuff are, starting to adopt as much of that as you can. Cause I do think it makes it more exciting. I do think that like all the little things that go into it become a lot clearer because at the end of the day, like an untrained eye, I can go to my local gym and watch that.
Yep.
And it's like, no, you can't. At least not at the LA Fitness, you know?
Well, it gives
So,
them something to talk about too. Like, oh my God, this guy moved a deadlift at 900 pounds at this speed. This guy moved
yeah,
880, but he moved it at this speed, which means he's not stronger, but his power output, he's a faster, more explosive athlete. If you want to know more
yeah,
about him, he ran track in college. Like, it gives an announcer stuff to talk about.
yeah,
I
hell yeah.
really think that's the direction we're going to go, and it's what the
Love
sport
that.
needs to get
Yeah,
money for the lifters
right?
to be able to get paid to be an athlete too.
I love that, dude. Yeah, that's cool stuff, and I appreciate you kind of expanded on that. Definitely want to get into, some of the questions that folks
Yeah,
had here.
fire away.
And so the first one here, when talking about foot placement, you mentioned claw foot. Is that spreading the foot? Okay, like like toes spreaded. I think
Yep.
explain that concept, and that'll be helpful there.
Yeah, so great question. There's a reason I probably started there with what you said you learned and got off different topic. Wide shoes, flat shoes, big toe box. That's the best thing you need. Our feet are stuck like this a lot and we need them more. The
Yeah,
easiest example of that is my car tire analogy. If
yeah,
you beef up the engine in a sports car, add turbos to it, most likely to get any traction, you're going to need wider, flatter tires that are sticky. Our foot's the same way. Our shoes have done massive damage to our feet as a society, especially women. I feel bad for them when I talk like high heels and ladies' boots aren't meant to be cool, right? That even guys' dress shoes, you got this pointy foot, ladies got their foot jammed into this beautiful, dainty little shoe. It's not helping them squat more. So,
yeah.
yes, the claw is equal contact, 2 points here, one in the back. Sometimes we like to talk 2 points here, 2 points here. The idea being it's always flat to the ground, never coming up on any one of those points. The wider, the flatter, the grippier, just like a car performance tire, the better.
Love that. Love that. All right, next one. Um, there's someone who it sounds like wants to get in the ballpark of where you're at in terms of, career and things. So far they're moving forward and going back to school to finish a kinesiology degree. Like, what do you think should be their next steps? And maybe this is, more generally like a, career path, like what options do you feel like are on the table for folks?
Yeah, number one, I would say stay humble. That's probably one of the things that help me. I see so many cocky coaches, and
Yeah.
I like confident, cocky athletes and coaches to an extent. But if you, oh, I don't need that. I already know that. Okay, there's a lot to learn. I've been through so many seminars, and sometimes it's like, I just don't want to talk like this educator. I don't like how they talk to the crowd. I didn't learn much else. Well, I was still humble and open, so I learned something. So, number one, stay humble and open. Number two, volunteer as much as you can. I've done so much free work from youth football clinics, right? I'm not
Yep.
a football coach. I'm not going to teach them how to run drills, but I volunteered to be next to a guy that gave me an opportunity, and I handed out Gatorades and was at the first aid tent.
Yep.
I started at Kabuki Strength volunteering. You start as a referee volunteering, and like it's got me
Yep.
so many places because people are afraid to work these days. So
Yeah.
stay humble and open and volunteer and continue to learn. And I really think it was a lot of the just volunteering. Like it led me to being in a place to potentially become Team USA head coach, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you there, and I will second that. Like there's a local high school near you that I guarantee understaffed, doesn't have a lot of money, but would grow their athletic department tenfold with some great strength and conditioning training.
Yep.
And you will have so many bodies, so many different things you can go do. And like, yeah, I second that wholeheartedly. So love what you're saying there. Now going into, I think it's a pretty unique, question here. Like, although O2 data is commonly examined during aerobics, have you collected data on oxygen saturation or, heme activity during powerlifting?
I have not, and I would love to. But that again goes right into what we were talking about the future of powerlifting.
Yeah,
I was just talking with a guy, I cannot remember the name of his company, has a breathing apparatus. And
yeah,
obviously, marathon runners and swimmers are like the prime target. And it was cool
Yep.
because it was at, I think, the LA Fit Expo. And I know that giant out of shape powerlifters and strongmen, if
Yep.
we could increase their aerobic capacity, they're more rested between sets. They
Yep.
recover better at night, right?
Yep.
There's multiple
Yes.
benefits. And again, being an athlete goes a long way. Even if
Yeah.
your only goal is strong, the more athletic, and even if we cut out cardio and other stuff, the closer we get to a competition. That's what I used to
Hmm.
do when I was fighting. Before a powerlifting
Yep.
meet, I just wouldn't go to class the last 2 weeks. I would just sit there,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
As soon as the meet was over, I'm back in class. Yeah, cardio sucked a little bit. Sparring rounds sucked. So there's definitely a place for it. You would even
Yep.
see a lower resting heart rate between sets, which means they're less anxietized. I was talking about an athlete with that here in person last weekend, watching their heart rate go up in between squat sets when stuff got real heavy. If they have
Hmm.
better O2 capacity and their resting heart rate is down, even if it spikes, it's still at a lower level. That's going to help us
Yeah.
upstairs. The benefits are 10x. It should be
Yep.
studied way, way more. It could
And
literally be another part of the future of powerlifting. So,
well, I think there's such a unique thing here with if you look at a lot of the best bodybuilders, Phil Heath, incredible basketball player, really,
yep.
really strong cardio base. Eddie Hall, Thor Bjornsson, I think one of them's a basketball player, one of them's a swimmer. Like there's a lot to this. Even Mitchell Hooper was a marathon runner 5 years before he came world's strongest man.
I'm
And
telling you, there's something to that.
yep, and so that cardio base matters a lot. My take on it, because I've actually done some NIRS data on myself and kind of like looked at like what was going on like max effort related work. Like if those capillaries are not able to force blood through like easily and especially under tension, like you are creating internal resistance as well. So if the blood is not moving efficiently, especially under something like a max effort, like you might literally have more mechanical work being done like on that level like intracellularly.
Yes,
So there's some unique stuff with this. I think that's a great question. I
it
think we
is.
kind of know loosely that better cardio is always going to help, but like to actually get to a meaningful prescription, I think yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. So I love
So
that.
one of the problems with string sports is um, there's just not the money in it. Even there's more money in strongman than there is powerlifting, weightlifting a little bit from the Olympics. But let's compare this to like soccer,
Yeah,
right? The amount of money that's in football in Europe
yeah,
is
yeah.
ridiculous. You go into
Stupid.
some of
Yeah,
them like, the amount of money that goes into training Formula F1 drivers, like their athletic
billions. Yeah.
what's why don't we get that in our sport? Well, individual athletes don't want to do XYZ. And unfortunately, if I take, my soccer players and I get them from a 275 squat to a 300-pound squat, the whole team got a percentage stronger. They're a little faster. 300 because of their sport is probably enough. And I hate to say that,
Hmm.
but I've seen that even in Major League Baseball. Like, well, it's good enough, and this is our sports standard, so they're in the realm. Yeah, but if we
Yep.
got them here, so even in the sports where there is money, strength doesn't need to be too extreme. It's good enough. So there's not enough
Hmm.
money to go into that side of it.
Yeah, and I think Ben Pakulski was one of the best things that ever happened to bodybuilding just because he took a data-driven approach to, running the sport. And I think that like, you know, the more, years we get under our belts, of course that's always going to get better, but we need like a freaking flux moment for powerlifting. And yeah, I see no reason why it can't be as popular as UFC, something, something of that nature. So
Yep.
totally agree.
Tech will take it
Um,
there. Tech will.
Yep. Agreed, man. Agreed. So I want to ask anyone to study under. Who do you think are like some good folks in the industry for people to go learn about powerlifting?
Um, I don't have. I usually have a good list. One of my favorite coaches out there to follow, Gus Cook, out of
Okay. I'm
Australia.
following right now.
Um,
Yeah.
I've coached him multiple times. He was the last coach I was working with,
Yep.
and my life just got too busy. That's why I'm not currently coaching with him for my own
Yep.
training. More so than people, I would say go study systems. Um, I just, yeah, I have a hard time recommending a lot of bodies right now, and maybe it's just where my brain is at as a coach.
Sure.
Um, Study West Side, study the stuff that we did at Kabuki.
Yep.
Rudy
Yep.
Cadlub and I are trying to revamp some coaching and education with a company we're starting up called Kabuki Legacy. I don't know where that'll go, but if it starts
Mm-hmm.
heading in the right direction, we'll be revamping some of the other digital stuff that just doesn't exist right now. But the reason I say that is study systems. Go read 531. Go read Tudor Bompa's book on
Mm-hmm.
periodization. Look
Yeah.
at systems. There's so much hype and buzz of what people are saying to sell stuff right now. Go look at
Yeah.
proven systems,
Yeah.
then look at what the systems do similarly. If you
Yeah.
pull from those, you're onto something.
Yeah, and I think every single system, regardless of whether it be football, baseball, lacrosse, powerlifting, weightlifting, right? Like any of these things, we're all using the same left and right boundaries, folks. It's law of accommodation, it's Schmelhausen's law, it's all these different like biological left and right boundaries. We've all got the same ones, but the specific expression, like on the field or on the platform, is like where there's some nuance, and that's where the actual training science begins, right? But if you don't understand those left and right boundaries, like you might be missing, the forest for the trees here. So
Yep.
yeah, I completely agree. Like Zatsiorski, Sif, right? You mentioned Bompa,
Yep.
Louis Simmons, like all these folks, like people have been there, done that, and it's well documented. And I just wish more people were willing to pick up a textbook and just
Yeah.
fucking read it
Well, and
from
I
one of those
think that
guys.
goes back to one of my earlier points where like I get frustrated with social media now. And I think one of the reasons I don't like to post a lot on social media, I'm gonna
Yeah.
start doing more stuff on YouTube, is
Mhm.
because all
Me too.
and this happened when we were at Kabuki Strength. I got so mad around the time TikTok came out. We were doing lives and Instagram TV or whatever it was back then, and these awesome
Yeah.
5 minute videos that were very deep in
Yes.
depth and awesome information for coaches. And then all of a sudden, Reels came out in TikTok, and the algorithm supports, in my opinion, stupid, funny stuff that's 10 seconds long. And I can
Yeah.
drop a knowledge bomb, and TikTok Instagram won't push it. Right. Same thing
Yep.
even for YouTube. Like it doesn't get pushed in the algorithm. And that's where I feel like coaches are now becoming entertainers on social media. And
Hmm.
that's why I send people to the principles and why I say, hey, instead of looking for the next shiny thing, and social media is really good at showing us the next shiny thing that it thinks we want, right?
Yep.
Stick to what works: breathing, bracing, spine mechanics, foot, hip, and shoulder.
Yeah.
Study some different programs, take from that. At the end of the
Love
day,
that.
strength athletes, for powerlifting, it's the big three. But
Hmm.
for coaches, we can add weightlifting in there and we can add overhead press in. So now we have
Yep.
whatever our big five, but
Yeah.
literally it's strength training with a barbell. You can only squat so many different ways. And if you spend more time trying to figure out how to squat and less time actually squatting, you would have just got stronger by going to the squat rack and squatting. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's,
Yep.
and yes, there's
Yep.
nuances, but it's so easy to get lost in the shiny things that the world shows us now and think we have
Yeah.
to do something. Just go squat more and do it better.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Dude, I hear you. I agree. And I'm at a conference in Vegas right now. And one of the speakers was like, how many of you went on Instagram or TikTok to go learn something in the last month? And everybody was like, nope. He's like, did you go on YouTube to do that? And like everybody raised their hand, you know what I mean? So like, I think that long form education, like if I'm going to try and learn some concept, I am certainly not like, maybe I'll go reference a post somebody talked about if I happen to see it, but I'm going to YouTube.
Yep.
So, I hear you. I'm right there with you in terms of getting more content on that platform. And yeah, I think that that's a great way to explore that like, continued learning stuff in that element. And then, thinking about like this next question, I think this is pretty cool. Like, do you think there should be set equipment standards throughout powerlifting feds? For example, only using a Texas bar for deads, monolift versus rack for squats, and bench width slash height. And like, how do you think that should be? I know I've actually got a pretty strong opinion on this for sure, so I'm curious to hear what you say.
I do, and that's what makes our job hard. Even with the USPA going out to sponsors like Gatorade and other people that can help us excel the sport to get these youth athletes in front of more Nike and things like that to give them more opportunity. to raise the sport up. But we've diluted our own sport as a group of powerlifters. And I hate to say that, but it's like you have a guy that gets upset with a rule over here with a powerlifting organization and they go start their own organization. And then some of his lifters follow him over there and then they get upset and go start another one. I forget the number of powerlifting organizations
Yeah,
in the
dude.
US. It's something stupid like 60.
It's
The
so
Olympics,
stupid. It's
there's a
like
couple
boxing.
reasons, yeah, why powerlifting is never going to be in the Olympics. I hate to say that, but I just don't think it ever will be. And one of the reasons is outside organizations like the Olympic Committee and companies like Gatorade and pick your poison are going to look at it and be like, you guys can't even decide on your own sport. And, me and you could go start our own weightlifting organization tomorrow if we want to and disagree with
Yes.
the way they do snatch and clean and jerk and say, hey, we want to do it equipped. We want to see what guys can do in briefs.
Yeah.
We could. It probably wouldn't go anywhere, but it would dilute the sport. So
Yep.
the other problem is you'll see, and this is where our own sport hates it itself. Like lifters and coaches and organization leaders will be frustrated at it too. But you look at the all-time world records. Well, I can go do it in an organization that lets me squat high wearing a different kind of suit, and you're going to say that's the best squat ever at 220 pounds. It does shouldn't beat this guy's, but the sport has accepted. And yes, some of those get so much criticism online they get turned over. But um,
Yeah.
in I heard somebody the other day say there should just be an untested organization and a tested. USPA is the biggest combined,
Yeah.
but you can't
Yeah.
really like you can respect something done in the IPF, especially if it's the heaviest squat ever, because they did it on a tiny bar. I don't
Yeah.
understand. It's like technology. Why we all
Yeah.
don't use a deadlift bar and a squat bar? It's in the name. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
just
Dude,
because it
I
wasn't there in 1970, and it wasn't until the late 80s when Buddy Caps
yeah.
created the first deadlift bar, right? Why it's
Yeah.
not widely adopted, I don't know.
Well, neither were fucking rubber tracks at the, 1940 whatever Olympics with
Yeah,
Jesse Owens, right? But guess what?
they're
You
here,
know.
and records are higher. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah,
a big
exactly.
problem in the sport for sure, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah, and look, if we want to stay in like, prehistoric lifting, we can make a category for that.
Yeah.
But like nobody's gonna want to watch that compared to, like the freakiest stuff we can see, right? And
Yep.
and I think that that's like, yeah, I'm definitely on board with like, dude, use the equipment, man. Like these records should be kept by like the studious people that like want to like preserve the history of the sport and everything. But I think Louis Simmons, said it best, like if they came out with single ply and he was like, hell yeah, we're doing that. They came out with, multiply and he's like, we're doing that. If they had 7,000 ply, he would have been like, fuck yeah.
We're doing it.
Like we're doing it. So I dig it. And yeah, I like your response to that. I'm on board with you. I think
Unfortunately, it would
last,
really take the whole community to
yeah,
come together. It really would. Like we would have to stop fighting each other as
yeah,
powerlifters and want to all do something to better the sport of strength.
yes, yeah. It's like, yeah, we don't need to make enemies out of anything. We can actually just collaboratively work on this, right? And get it better. Probably not going to happen, but we can hope.
Too
And
many
I
strong people in the room with too many different egos and ideas is never a good thing.
Yeah, dude, I 100% agree. And yeah, I think that is like, kind of part of like why we are so excited to partner.
Yeah.
Is because you guys do have that mission. We have that mission as well. Now last question here from the crowd. What's the best method to manage volume with assistant lifts?
Yeah. I would have told you something really flashy back in the day. And
Yeah.
went back to my spreadsheet and my calculator and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting how much life changes as a coach. Um, I feel like the pendulum really swings. The new coach, I had no idea what to even do, so the data wouldn't have told me anything. I just tried to kill people. Then I learned more and I got super data driven and thought there was a magic answer and
Mm-hmm.
studied and trained and
Mm-hmm.
tracked data for years and years and years. The amount of data I used to track on some of my CrossFitters, I don't know where I
Yeah.
had the time to track
Yeah.
volume on 17 different, like, well, how many rope climbs have I given them in the last month for their grip volume? Like, that doesn't need to be studied. That's
Yeah.
not going to make them better.
Right.
So, my answer to come full circle where I'm at now and what I would tell all coaches now is very simple time. That's it.
Explain.
And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is, right, if we're in the football room, how do I manage the volume of their secondary lifts? Well, if I only have them, I'm helping a friend, a client of mine, with some lifting at her school. What do you have time for? If you have 45 minutes, don't worry about tracking their volume. You don't have enough time to give them too much, right? You have their main lifts that you have to get through in a short amount of time, which means they're going fast. So you can't even give them adequate rest period to squat as much as possible. Then you're down to
Yeah.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
It
Yep.
is what it is. Get them
Yep.
through as much as they can. If we're
Yeah.
not in that setting, most power lifters that I find or athletes training outside of a school setting, their life is the dictator of time. Unless they're single and have no job or they're not doing anything else, I might have to kick them out of the gym on hour three. Most people aren't going to want to be in the gym that much. So they're that and how they feel that day is also going to auto regulate the volume that I give them. I
Yep.
know I've managed too much volume for an athlete. When they say, "Hey coach, I was in the gym for like 3 hours, I can't get all this stuff done." Cool, that's what I needed. We're now dropping the volume back by like 25%.
Yeah.
As we get closer to competition, if I am using a good system like Bridge or whatever to
Hmm.
track
Hmm.
my athletes, then it's really easy to drop that back a little bit. But we have to know. Ultimately, I used to say how much is maximum recoverable volume, and we
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
chased that for a while at Kabuki on main lifts and secondary lifts. The problem is, as people's life changes, they get in a new relationship, they have kids, they get a new job, they move. All of those things just changed your magic data points, and now you have to redo all of it.
Yeah.
If
And,
they're getting beat up in the gym, they'll probably tell you, Coach, I can't keep going at this rate. I'm dying. Too much
for
volume.
sure.
Let time and recovery
Yeah.
dictate for you. It will tell you.
Yeah, and I love that because, no plan survives first contact. And in addition to that, like if we really look at like what it takes to have this like perfect data-driven setup, like the Bulgarians and the Soviets did that, and they also like slaughtered a bunch of athletes in the process, between like the 50s and like the 80s, 90s even. Like we controlled these people's lives so much that like a lot of these athletes were just freaking depressed because they actually had no self-expression anymore. And like more data, more data, more data. There's a guy at the conference here. His name's Austin Stout. He works with a lot of bodybuilders and such. And like, dude, like what you're talking about, like the lifestyle, like the subtle change, the allostatic load, right? That this person is under, like you just can't, like people will become so like there's certain brain types that'll be like psychopathic neurotic about like every little detail here, and that is like the worst possible thing you can feed into as a coach. And then
Yep.
there's your athletes who like probably don't lean into it enough, right? And so it's such like a person to person element. And you're speaking to your mastery of the craft, I think, with the art of coaching side of things, in knowing that that this time element is kind of like the 90% effect variable here. So I love that, man. Cool.
Yep.
Excellent, brother. Well, I think that's going to be it for us today, folks.
Oh,
As always, like really appreciate everyone for carving time out of your day to come do this, especially, on a Tuesday morning. So this was a ton of fun. Kyle, thank you so much for your generosity and, being here, man. And what a fun episode.
yeah.
That's one of my favorites we've done.
My
So,
pleasure. I love coaching coaches. It's been my
yeah,
all-time favorite thing. I love working with athletes too, but coaching and giving back to coaches. If I could have learned a lot of this stuff early on in my career, who knows how much better everybody would be and where I would
right.
be at today. So it's my absolute pleasure to be able to give back.
Yeah, dude. Love it. Cool. All right, folks. Thanks for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And that's it. We're signing off. Later, folks.
Appreciate it. See you.